I interpret Matthew 24 much differently than most Christians do, let alone atheists. So in a way, in this video, I'm arguing with both sides here. And it's completely okay to disagree with me. I completely encourage anybody who watches my video to really think about whether or not they agree with me. And it's really not so much disagreement that bothers me. It's the lack of thinking, the lack of postulation, the lack of any, further consideration beyond your first initial thought. I'm ranting. Roll title screen. I think this video is better understood with some technical terms that will help establish some framework for what we're talking about here. So I'm going to define some terms first. The first term is eschatology, which basically means the theology of end times, or goal-centric theology of the biblical narrative. This is the general term for the two branches of eschatology that we're going to be dealing with in this video. The first term is dispensationalist theology, which I think is better understood through an understanding of the Left Behind series, the whole tribulation, the whole rapture theology, the whole end of the world sort of scenario. And this I think is the most popular theology within mainstream Christianity. And then there's Preterist theology, which is a perspective on the biblical narrative as if the prophecies in the Bible have already been fulfilled. The Preterist interpretation is my view of Matthew 24. Most Christians will take this text to be a prophecy about the end of the world, but that is not my view at all. This isn't an interpretation that I just came up with on my own. It's actually a position that I was convinced of by Pastor Douglas Wilson, who, if I haven't said it on this channel before, is absolutely my favorite debater. Wilson demonstrates that this position on Matthew 24 has a serious argumentative advantage of being able to connect it to real-world historical fulfillment. And I don't believe it because of the argumentative advantage. I believe it because I think it's more biblically consistent. So let's talk about the text. But if you haven't read Matthew 24, or if you need a refresher or something, I think you should probably pause this video and go read Matthew 24 all the way through, and then you can resume this video. I think people interpret Matthew 24 through a dispensationalist worldview because in the English text it says the gospel will reach the whole world. And our modern understanding of the whole world is a lot different than what their understanding was at the time. The Greek word used for the whole world in this text is the word oikoumene. At least I think that's how you pronounce it. Which can mean the whole habitable earth, but it has a much larger semantic range than that. The word can mean the entire region of the world that was inhabited by the Greeks. Or it can mean the entire Roman world, which is what Luke 2:1 and Luke 4:5 refer to, as well as Romans and Acts. So if we're using most common usage in the Bible, then the interpretation of it meaning the whole Roman world is the more rational interpretation. Jesus predicts a number of things that are historically consistent with the conditions of the time that he's talking about. Which makes a lot more sense because Jesus also says in this text that these things must be fulfilled before this generation passes away. Wow, that was butchered. That's a pretty clear time frame that Jesus establishes for the things that he's prophesying about. For example, Jesus talks about earthquakes, which makes sense because the region that he's talking about sits right on top of the Dead Sea transform. Jesus also talks about wars in the kingdom, which fits the description of the Jewish rebellion that happened during that time. Jesus also said that wickedness will increase, which is pretty evident considering the persecution that happened and the Jewish gangs that formed because of the events that were happening at that time. Jesus says a lot of things, but one thing that he doesn't say is anything that indicates an end of the world scenario. Jesus starts the dialogue by talking about the destruction of the temple, and I don't think there's any good reason to believe that he changes the subject, especially without any linguistic clues that suggest otherwise. Jesus is simply not predicting the end of the world in this text. What he's predicting is the destruction of the temple in 70 AD and the end of the Second Temple period, which has already happened. So what are your thoughts on the meaning of Matthew 24? Comment down below to engage with me. Like and subscribe this video if you want to see more of what I do here on this channel. That's it for this one. Thanks for arguing with me. I'll see you on the next one.